Qur'ans do they have? We're going to show you 6. The 6 best Qur'ans they have. These are the 6 most authoritative Qur'ans. Let's go ahead and name them. Hatun, what's this one here?
So first one is Topkapı Musaf, which is based in Istanbul in Turkey.
Okay, in the Topkapı Palace there in Istanbul.
Yeah, in
Okay.
Topkapı Museum. Yeah, so when we look at this Quran, remember we are asking one perfect Quran from Surah 1 to Surah 114, exactly the same what Muslims are reading today.
And how much of the Quran is this? Is this complete?
This is not complete Quran, let alone it has 2,270 variations.
2,270. I stand corrected. You're right. It is 2,270.
So
See how obedient I am? Don't you love it?
you need to be obedient to Christ,
So
not to me.
what are manuscript variants? Explain to them what a manuscript variant is.
So when we put the two texts together, if there is any written version of the word do not match with one another, we would identify that as textual variations.
Let me give you an example right here. We have the Topkapı right here with the Allah on the side. And when you look at Allah, you will see that it is a version. Go ahead and keep talking while I bring it up.
So
Right here is the Topkapı. So here's an example of what we're talking about. You can see that Allah has been added at a later date.
So this is Surah 66 verse 8. When we put this manuscripts with the current Quran together, with this one together, we see Surah 66 verse 8 is different.
It has the word Allah in it. But the Topkapı
Allah
did not
wasn't-
have the word Allah in it.
It was inserted intentionally into the
At
manuscripts.
a later date, you can see it's in the margin. It's not as big as the other letters. It is much smaller, written in a different nib at a later time. Okay, are you following that? Why did they need the name Allah there? Because you don't need the name Allah in that verse. Let me give you some other examples. Here's another example. This is from the Codex Fustat Umayyad Codex from the 8th century. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different places where Allah has been added at a later date. Did they forget the name of their God? So why did they have to put Allah in here? You don't need Allah in any of these verses because it's understood it's talking about God. Why did they put Allah at the top above it? You can see in a completely different name at a completely later time. Do you know the answer? Does our German friend know the answer?
What?
Can you repeat that again?
What is this? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You can't get what you're trying to prove. What are you trying to prove?
Okay, she doesn't understand what we're trying to prove. What do the Muslims say about the Quran? Has it ever changed in 1400 years? Never. Every Muslim, we went through the scholars, you weren't here when we read them and quoted them. Every major Muslim scholar today says that the Quran we have in our hand is exactly the same that which was written and compiled by Uthman in 652. Now this is from the late 8th century. This is 100 years later. It is not from the time of Uthman. In fact, none of these Qurans are from the time of Uthman. They are all from the 8th and 9th century. Uthman lived in the mid 7th century. Yet here they have added 9 different Allahs, 9 different cases where the name of Allah had to be added to the text. But you don't need to add it to the text. It would have been perfectly okay if they did not have the name Allah there. So why did they add it to the text? Do you want to know why? Does anybody want to know why? They added it to the text in every case so that it corresponds with the present Hafs text, the text we use today. The Hafs text has Allah in every one of these places. That's why they had to add Allah at a later date. Hold on a minute. So what is the Hafs text, you ask? We'll get to that. Let's continue on.
So when we look at the Topkapı Musaf, which we were looking at, what we see is it has nothing to do with Islamic Prophet Muhammad. It has nothing to do with Uthman, let alone it has nothing to do with the current Quran. 1236 verses, yet that Quran is not the Topkapı Quran. We see there are 2270 textual variations in the Topkapı Quran.
You know, she is right. I was wrong by 20. I give up. Okay, what about this one right here? This is the second most important one.
Okay, let me just give the date for the Topkapı. Also, Topkapı manuscripts are been dated approximately 70 years after the Uthman. And also what we see is certain
I'm gonna challenge you on that. Parts of the Topkapı.
I said approximate.
But also some of it comes from the 2nd century AH, which means after
century.
719.
Yes.
So well into the 8th century. So parts of the Topkapı, she is correct, are written between the beginning of the 8th century up until 720. But other parts of the Topkapı are written as possibly up
So approximately 5 pages of this Quran is written by someone else.
someone else.
Yes.
In a different hand.
Yep.
And who are the ones that did the research on this? They're from your country.
Muslims.
They are Muslims, but what are their names?
Tayyar Altıkulaç
Dr. Tayyar Altıkılıç,
and İhsanoğlu.
Dr. Ekmelidin
İhsanoğlu.
So both Muslim scholars, considered to be the world's leading Muslim scholars today, they are the first ones to look at all of the 6 major manuscripts from 2002 to 2007. They took 5 years to research these manuscripts. They were given access to every one of these manuscripts. We are using their research. Let me repeat that. We're using their research to show you the problems with the Quran today. Let's continue on.
So next one we have is the Samarkand.
Come right here.
That's the Samarkand. It is sadly has nothing to do with Muhammad, has nothing to do with Uthman, and it has nothing to do with the current Quran we are reading. Remember, we are looking at simple Quran. 114 chapters, 6,236 verses from the time of Muhammad. Yet Samarkand has been actually dated 8th century.
8th century. Remember, Uthman supposedly finished the Quran in 652. That's mid-7th century. So we're talking 50, 60, 70 years later. But this only goes up to Surah 43. There's 114 surahs in the Quran.
I don't want to be mean, Jay, but some of this Quran, part of this Quran has been carbon dated, and carbon dating goes 855.
Oh dear.
I don't want to be
mid-9th
mean.
century. Much too late. What's more, of the 43 surahs that are there, how many surahs are complete? Only 1. All of the others have missing. How many surahs don't even exist amongst the 43?
Let me read it. Surah 1 is not there. Surah 8 is not there. 9 is not there. 10 is not there. 13 is not there. 21, 22, 23, 24 is not there. 25 is not there. 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35 is not there.
That is 18 surahs are missing. Of the 43 they claim are there. So why do they say this is complete? Can you see the Muslims have been lying to us all these years?
All these
You
years.
need to make sure that you quote what the scholars are saying. Do not listen to what the Muslims are saying. You need to go to scholarship. This is considered to be one of the greatest of the manuscripts. What does Altıkılıç say about the Arabic in this manuscript?
I think he doesn't think person who wrote the Arabic well knew the
He
Arabic.
says whoever wrote this Quran did not know their Arabic very well. There are grammatical mistakes. There is lazy writing written by about 5 different scribes. He says don't even use it. Don't even use it, he says.
It says undiscipled spelling, scribal mistakes, copyright mistakes, written by amateur.
Written by amateurs like you and me. Now let's go to the third one.
For sure it wasn't me who wrote it down, Jay.
Okay, now this is the one that's here in the British Library. This is the one we have right down the street. This is the Ma'il Quran, known as the 2165 manuscript. It's called Ma'il because it's slanted. Ma'il means slanted in Arabic. So this concerned many Muslims believe that this was the greatest manuscript. It only goes up to Surah 43. it only contains 53% of the Quran, but it does contain more than the Samarkand. So that's at least one thing in favor. What kind of script is it? Ma'il, that's Hijazi. And what do we know about the Hijazi?
Just before that, I want to make sure that we all understand this Quran has nothing to do with Muhammad. This Quran has nothing to do with Uthman. So this is not the Quran. I am looking to be exactly the same with 114 chapters of the Quran.
This only goes up to Surah 43.
Yeah.
Now, can you see? I'm sorry, I meant 53. Let's go continue on. What was the date for this Quran? Because there's a huge dispute concerning the date.
I think you need to remind me that.
When Martin Links, who was responsible for all the manuscript, who is a Muslim, convert to Islam, has been responsible for the manuscript for many, many years. When he dated this manuscript, he dated it to 790, late 8th century. When Baker, the current curator for the manuscripts, when he became curator, he put it down to 690. Someone telephoned him, and after 10 minutes of talking to him, asking him how did he come to 690, they said, would you mind if we brought down a reporter to interview you? 2 weeks later, it went back to 790. What does that tell you, Hatun?
It has.
Colin Baker did not know what he was doing. But then who is Colin Baker and what is his expertise? He is a medical scientist. He only studies medical works. He doesn't study Quran. How is he dating it to the 7th century? Now,
That's
Islamic Awareness and the Dawah team have quoted him. But they don't realize that he didn't even know what he was talking about. Martin Links knows much more what he's talking about. But can you see what we're dealing with? We are finding folk scientists who are dating these Qurans. You need to go to the Arabists, those who know, who are using paleographical studies to understand how to date it. Now, what about this one over here?
So that is the Paris manuscripts. It has lots of on it, and it has nothing to do again with Muhammad, with Uthman.
Could you get my coat?
It has nothing to do with Muhammad, with Uthman, and it has nothing to do with the current Quran we are reading today. What we are looking is 114 chapters, 6,236 verses, exactly the same what we are reading, and Paris is not the answer to that question.
There are actually 3 or 4 Paris manuscripts, are there not?
Yeah, 328, 300.
328A, 328C. These are actually different pieces. Some of them, one of them is 16% of the Quran. The other one is 22% of the Quran. So neither of these are complete. Am I correct?
None of them are complete.
Do they have manuscript variants?
They do contain manuscripts variations as well as not the full Quran.
Not the full Quran. In fact, when we look at the the Arab BNF 328A, it has over 93 has 93 manuscript variants in just the 22% that it contains. Now, these are words or phrases that are different in the Quran today from these manuscripts, proving that someone changed them along the way, that there has been correction along the way.
Let me just tell you in summary what we have. We have Arabic 331, which is, 87 folios. We have Arabic 330G, it is only 43 folios. Arabic 320C, only 18 folios. So none of them gives us the one perfect Quran which Muslims have been claiming to.
Now, Islamic Awareness website and Dawah team here believe that this is a 7th century manuscript. They believe that this one is a 7th century manuscript. They believe that these 4 that we have shown you are all written before 719, within the 1st century of Islam AH. We're going to get to that question, but let's go at 2 more manuscripts that I find. This is the Husseini manuscript. The Husseini manuscript is found in Egypt, in Cairo, and some people call it the Cairo manuscript as well.
Yeah.
Does it have, is it the full manuscript? Is it the full Quran?
No, it's not full Quran. It's only 1087 folios. It's not the full Quran, and it is dated in 2nd century Hijrah, which is 8th century.
Possibly some say even 9th century. Doros said 9th century. What about this Quran here? Because this one is the most exciting. This was discovered in 1975 in Yemen, in Sana'a, in the Sana'a Mosque. When they were clearing it out, they fell to the ground. And when they looked at it, unlike the German lady over here, they could not read it. Even though she said you could read it quite easily. Nobody in Yemen could read it because it had no diacritical marks and it had no vowels. So who did they have to fly down to read this manuscript?
German guy?
The Germans. And who were they? Gerd Quinn, Dr. von Bothmer, and Dr. Oli. The three most authoritative authorities on the early Arabic script. They are from Saarland University in Saarbrücken, Western Germany. They were flown down in 1981 to look at this manuscript. They immediately realized that this manuscript was very early because it had no diacritical marks, it had no vowelization. They quickly took pictures of every one of the pages. They put them on the microfilm. The Yemeni government started hearing what they were saying, and they quickly confiscated their microfilms. This is what you do when you don't like what you hear. You either burn manuscripts or you confiscate manuscripts. Are you right? Burning and confiscating. It's going to get better. Hold on. So here, they confiscated their manuscripts until 1997 when they finally released the microfilms to them. This is a picture of one of those pages. Take a look here. You can see Surah 19. Where that yellow mark is, it jumps to Surah 22. What happened to Surah 20 and 21?
Good question.
It appears on this side. Can you see it's a completely different script? A completely different text. This is about 60 years after this one. There's 60 years between these two pages. That is Hijazi on this side. This is a later Kufic script, or a later what some call a Western Hijazi. Now what's fascinating, when you look at this, you can see that this is a evolving text. Are you following that? An evolving text. But that's not all that they found. When they looked at it carefully, they noticed that parts of it had a lower script on it. Can you see there are two different scripts there? Somebody wrote on this to begin with in Arabic, and then they washed it off and wrote over top.
They wrote it the Quranic verses in Arabic. They washed it and then they rewrite the Quranic verses. It's not any writing, it is the Quranic verses. And today we are able to read what was the underwriting.
Now when you wash off, remember, these are all written on animal skins. Because they're so durable, you can wash it off. And when you wash it off, it looks like there's nothing left, right? So that's why they wrote over top. What they didn't realize is that after 1,300 years, that ink starts to bleed through. And so when you put it under ultraviolet light, you can see the lower text. Now the lower text has now been distinguished and has now been pulled aside, sorry, that's not the right word, has been extricated from the upper text. Asma Hilali wrote a book in 2017. So 2 years ago, September 2017. She has now shown the entire lower text. And what do we now know about that lower text?
So there are 63 verses on the writing, and there are 70 variations within the 63 verses.
And what kind of variations are there? There are verbal differences. 25 times it has different nouns, articles, participles, and conjunctions. There are prepositions, isolated letters, 29 times, and expressions that are different between the lower text and the Quran we have today. Entire sentences, 16 times, entire sentences are included in the lower text than what we have in the Quran today. Some overlap within the verses. So how do you deal with that? How did Asma Hilali deal with it? Remember, Asma Hilali is a Muslim. How did she answer that?
They were probably written by amateurs or students.
This is a school text, she called it. A school text means it's written by a student who didn't know any better. Now, what's the problem with that?
You trust the eternal word of Allah, which is supposed to affect the eternity of people, to a student.
Why would you allow a student to write on parchment? This is animal skin. This is the most expensive form of writing. Remember, the early church did not have parchment. The early church, all the Bibles were written on papyrus until the 325, until Constantine, who was the emperor, became a Christian, made it the national religion. He therefore commissioned 50 of these codices.
Made it legal for you to be Christian.
Okay, can you see? He was the one that commissioned codices for the Council of Nicaea. So you don't have, even the early church didn't have manuscripts like that. They would be prohibitively expensive to write on animal skin. Just the Sinaiticus alone, the New Testament, Sinaiticus, you have to have 62 different deer skins to make that one codex. Who could have and who could make that unless you were wealthy? So can you see, why would they give this to students? Secondly, why is it a student's text is the oldest Quran in history? We don't have anything older, and it belongs to a student. Thirdly, why did they then write over top? Now the upper part of the Quran, this upper text, is dated to 705 and later. The lower text is possibly dated to 680 and later. Whatever the case is, you can see there are two completely different Qurans. So what is the conclusion of Dr. Elizabeth Pritt, who is the one who has done all the work on this manuscript? Do you know her conclusion?
You give me the conclusion and then I will add something.
This is a nascent Quran with corrections then washed off and rewritten in 705.
And different ayahs,
So,
not just saying.
here's the problem. Here's the problem. When we look at the other earliest manuscripts, what we see is when someone makes a mistake or miss something, you just insert the word there. But in some manuscripts, we see whole words are being washed away, and then they rewrite something 50 years after with the different verses. So something has been done intentionally to get rid of what was written before.
Okay.
Because if it was simple student mistakes, we would see the insertions or corrections, not the full washed away script.
The fact that this is the earliest Quran, the fact that they say is written by a student, the fact that the upper text does not agree with the lower text, the fact that the lower text disagrees in 70 places with the Quran we have today, yet it's only 63 verses long, proves that this is a completely different Quran. And that's why, folks, we're now saying it looks like they created the Quran and changed it already during the time of Abdul Malik. Where's that German lady? She talks about Abdul Malik. Can you see? Abdul Malik does have something to say for this. Abdul Malik is the one that had to create the Quran because he was the one that introduced the Prophet, did he not?
He did.
And he produced it on the Dome of the Rock, on the coins, and on the caliphal protocols.
So we look at the earliest big manuscripts and we say actually none of them are from Muhammad, none of them from Uthman, and none of them is exactly the same what we are reading today.